The 18th of January, the Gallant Mall is where everybody needs to show up in Parklands in Nairobi. And on the 27th at the Eka Hotel in Eldoret, it's the first of its kind ever organized in Kenya. It's the first study abroad conference, and it's bringing top experts from Cradle and international universities from across the world. The conference is packed with the most knowledge you will ever get at one place to make your best study abroad discussions. It's not your typical study abroad fair, so what can you expect? Learners will learn about AI-powered scientific tools to start to study. There will also be the event highlight, a thrilling battle of study destinations where you will get the inside scoop on the best countries for your higher education, and you'll also there will also be tailored breakout sessions where you can get information from university representatives. That's not all. You'll meet international university reps from around the world in face-to-face conversations. It's not just another study fair. This is the first of its kind study abroad conference. It empowers you to make the most comprehensive study abroad decisions to own your future. It's an invite-only event. Limited slots are available, but it is free to attend. What you need to do, register www.cradle.com or call 0799 000 444 or 0799 000 444. All right, lest we forget, it's a conversation that we're having this hour, and it's born from several things. And we invite you to have this conversation with us as we look at some of those. All right, lest you forget, there are certain things that you were told would happen. And one of those big ticket items is on the agenda for the current government. Was education. We are in a place where it is necessary to talk about this as one of the fundamental pillars of any economy, what you do with your nation's education. I'm looking at the manifesto that the UDA party shared and said, look, the plan, it was actually called the Kenya Plan. It was what the nation was promised was going to happen should you put this particular government into place. And there were very many sectors that were discussed, but far be it from me not to look at what was said specifically about education, and I'll tell you why. That there's certain things going on at the moment, and some of those make the headlines this morning. Administrators, traders reel from the effect of missing Form 1 class. They're not missing, there is no Form 1. So traders who would normally bring in larger amounts of, food and produce and things like that are now seeing a reduction in business. Which was to be expected. We were told that was going to happen. But let's look at other things that are making the headlines. Schools will have to wait longer for the release of 48 billion shillings of capitation. Now, remember over the weekend we did hear from the CS Julius Ogamba, that 50% of capitation was going to be released to schools. We assumed that was going to happen at the opening of schools, which was yesterday, today, and it continues into tomorrow. Well, Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Mbadi says public schools will have to wait longer for funds from the National Treasury, and said it will release 48 billion in capitation later this month. Schools opened yesterday. It's not waiting for anybody. That capitation is needed yesterday. It's not needed on the 31st of January. And even the 31st of January that we're talking about is in hope. It is in hope that it will happen. It is not that it is actually happening. It is in hope that it will happen by the 31st. On the same page, junior school teacher shortage continues to bite. On the manifesto, lest you forget, one of the things that was said is that 116,000 teachers would be hired in 2 years. I think we're just getting to around 70,000 now. So yes, teachers have been hired. Vis-a-vis the number that is required in the country, still low. Junior school shortage continues to bite. Publishers say that there is no textbook crisis. They are working on those books. They will be out. They'll be out. The publishers say there's no problem. They've attributed delays in the distribution of competency-based curriculum textbooks to the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, even as it allayed concerns over shortage of grade 9 books. The textbooks for grade 9 learners are in the final stages of distribution to public schools. One would have expected that if the term starts on the 6th, 7th of January, that the books that were needed would be available when?
When the schools open.
On the 6th or 7th of January. Yes. Right. Not that we are now still trying to see how we are going to distribute things. Doesn't make sense to me that a nation where you have a national exam taking place in every school on the same day, that the papers can make their way to these schools in time. But for some reason, it's difficult to distribute books that's supposed to start a term by a certain date. These are some of the things that we're looking at today. And lest we forget, education is not a suggestion. Education is not a favor that you do for children in the country. It is actually a right. And I want to look at some of the things that were said about education. Brilliant picture there of the president with children in school. They talk about education being the ultimate means of ensuring an equitable society. Equitable education ensures that every child has a chance to fulfill their potential and rise to the highest level of accomplishment, irrespective of their social background. Conversely, an inequitable education system which favors those from socially and economically advantaged backgrounds is the surest way of maintaining or developing a class society. Now, universal primary education was achieved in 2003. The cost of joining a boarding secondary school is now 80,000 shillings, which is very expensive for ordinary working Kenyans. This is from the manifesto. This is not me. While bursaries mitigate some of this bias, they are far from adequate. Bursaries just won't cut it. Distress calls for and heroic acts of determination by bright children who are unable to take up their place in such high schools has become the norm. A girl in Tharaka Nithi County made news by walking 50 kilometers to the school she had been admitted to in neighboring Embu. A boy sought to pay his school fees with a cockerel. Those things are still happening. The Kenya Kwanza commitment, lest you forget, was to address the inequities in the education system so as to level the playing field for all children, irrespective of their background, to commit to equitable universal basic education defined as 12 years of schooling. The Kenya Kwanza government will pay for in-service teacher training. It will bridge the current teacher shortage gap of 116,000 within 2 financial years. It will establish a special service tariff for all learning institutions. It will review the current exam-based system of academic progression. It will improve the capacity of day secondary schools to guarantee access to quality education. It will double the amount of money. Here, I'm parking. It'll double the amount of money allocated to the school feeding program to immediately raise the number of beneficiaries from 2 million to 4 million. It will domesticate teacher recruitment and deployment of entry level according to the UNESCO teacher deployment practice, which treats education as a cultural process. And it continues and it goes on and on. Noting that education is a fundamental right and that it is what is going to raise the profile of any society when you make sure that your nation's children are educated from early learning all the way through to university. What we see in the current is quite worrying, and you must remember that a promise was made. We've had this conversation for a couple of days, but when schools open, we are greeted with the stark reality of really how bad things are. And what are we going to actually do to sort out the problem? When you turn up in school and there are school arrears meant to be paid and you can't pay, that schools today have to ask parents to pay upwards of 20, 30, 40,000 shillings to their school fees to make up for the late capitation. What kind of rabbit hole are we staring down? Mm-hmm. And these are some of the issues that we're saying need to be addressed. When you say that school buses must not be on the road before 6 a.m. and they must not be there after 6 p.m., what have you done to ensure that within the radius of your living area, there is a school that is up to scratch in terms of standards? Can we make such edicts without making sure that the system is running parallel at every single turn?
It becomes very difficult to take this current Minister for Education seriously if he spoke and said that capitation had been sent to schools. What on earth was he talking about? Because there's a clear and direct contradiction to that. The minister who is in charge of the Treasury, the Cabinet Secretary, has said clearly funds are being mobilized. Then you make a pronouncement about something like transport. Surely, some of these things need to be thought of before you actually utter them. Roadside declarations. What is our policy when it comes to transportation of students? What is the policy? If there is a policy, what is it with regards to how children should leave the homes they live in and go to the education facilities that they go attend? If I look at the city of Nairobi, the children who traverse probably up to 40 kilometers a day, going another 40 back daily to get to the school that the parents feel is the adequate school. And the school is not around the corner. 40 kilometers is not next door to where you live. Now, when you make such a pronouncement, what exactly have you just said?
So you don't care.
You don't know. This is where now the ignorance comes in. You don't know.
You don't know what?
You are not speaking on a subject. This particular individual is not talking on a subject that he has given sufficient thought to. And all the issues surrounding this are not being addressed. So you make a pronouncement.
CT, you know what, for me, and why I think it now makes it even fundamentally worse, is that you do know. You are aware of how dire the situation is. But because you need to, in your thinking, you need to say something, you need to make it appear as though you're doing a certain level of work, you make the pronouncement in spite of the real situation. So you really show that you don't care. For me, that is worse because you are aware. Okay, let's say you don't know. You were the one who gave us the example the other day of, okay, maybe you don't know, but you have people around who are fanning the flames of your information. They will tell you. They will tell you that somebody has to walk 50 kilometers. They will tell you. They are aware. You see the things that we talk about? You see that school behind you in Kilifi County? That school, that picture behind you. CT, you think that the folks who are at the Ministry of Education, who are in government, don't know that schools like that exist? They know that schools like that exist. They know that the children of this nation are being subjected to sitting in schools like that. You tell me what happens in a school like that when it rains. Who's standing teaching there? You tell me what happens when somebody writes on the blackboard there. You tell me where CBC, which is supposed to be a wholesome education, when it's talking about things like art and craft, is talking about things like swimming, is talking about things like music. You tell me how that's happening in a school like that. And somewhere in somebody's crazy imagination, that school is in the system. That school has a name. The children who go to that school they have NEMIS numbers. Are you understanding what I'm saying? They have NEMIS numbers.
Yeah.
They are aware, but they decide to do these things in spite of this knowledge. For me, it is fundamentally worse. You know, but still you make a decision and you are aware.
And I tend to agree with the Ndu that they know. Because let's take an example of what happened in Baringo the other day. Insecurity in the area. Students are forced to go home. But even then, as security has been deployed and everything, what have we done to restore infrastructure in those areas? But that aside as well, when we're giving up this manifesto on what we're going to do with education and everything else, are we planning? Did they have a plan to increase the number of schools, or are we using President Moi's constructed schools?
You know, the the proof of the pudding is in the eating. When I say they do not know, this is what I mean. Knowledge is demonstrated by the outcomes of the actions that are supposed to manifest that knowledge. When you make declarations and proclamations that fly in the face of a certain reality, there are things that you're patently ignorant about. You are ignorant about the consequences of what it is that you are saying. You are ignorant about the future that you are creating. When you subject these young individuals, these young Kenyans, these young sovereigns, these young citizens to all the things that we see, these children are going to be part of a generation that is going to be traumatized in almost everything that they do. Yesterday you heard of a theory I had about how it is students ended up burning schools. What do you think these students who are now in the CBC can't get educated, you've lost time in education, capitation doesn't come in, and whoa, what about the chaos when it comes to people reporting to schools?
School.
Many parents cannot afford to take themselves with their children to school. And what do? They ensure that the transport the child has drops the child at the school. And what do you meet when you get to the school? She was telling us a story of something that she was told about.
Yeah. So, I mean, just so we know that a lot of schools opened yesterday and the day before.
Yes.
And, you know, it was told to me that yesterday, as you line up, so one of the and one of the big schools, a national school in this country, so you line up, and one of the things that you need to do before you're then admitted into school is that you need to make sure that your school fees are cleared. So they have given a notice. You come with your school fees having been cleared, and if you didn't, you come the following day with your parent, guardian, whatever. So you appear at the line, and this girl, you know, is waiting to be cleared. Form principal says to her, well, you have a balance. And you're not in a booth somewhere.
It's in the public.
It's in the public. Your colleagues, your peers are just there sitting.
Everybody can hear.
Everybody can hear.
And they're not whispering.
No. You. This is the paper. This is your name. This is your index number. You owe this certain amount.
What are you doing here?
No. Not even what are you doing here. Iko happy, pesa. My dad said he would pay. Where's your dad? This girl said, I am here alone. And that is the reality for a lot of people. You put your child at the bus stop, they go to school, and you pray to God Almighty that everything is all right. So you appear at school that day, they tell you, well, you have a balance. Now, note, this is a balance from the year before. We're not even talking about this term, which is meant to be cleared. Girl has gotten off the vehicle thing. Vehicle has done what immediately? Turned around and gone back to where it's come from. You're there, with your luggage, you're left. You have arrears to be paid. You have the certain term that's supposed to be paid. You've been told that talk to your parents. And then we can talk to your parents.
Shouldn't
and tell them
the
that we
school
don't
be
have,
talking to the parents?
we don't have your payment. We cannot. So stand over there and let these other people now sort out, and we'll sort you out later.
Just play this thing out. It's opening day. It's in the public. First of all, what sort of system is this? I mean, in all honesty, what sort of system is this? It's like everyone is in a stadium and you're being told to queue, and everybody can hear everything that is being said, and students are being asked, what has the student got to do with the fees that's supposed to be paid? Since when do students pay their own fees? Who is it who's responsible for this child? And what is the school's role in ensuring these things are done? And what is this thing about parading a child and embarrassing them in front of everybody so that the whole world knows that they haven't paid fees? What is this?
And even as we talk about the fees, information that I've gathered so far is we have a clear government policy on how much fees is paid even at these big schools, say the national schools. And it is a capitation. It has been capped at around 52,000 shillings. But over the years, it has been increased because we need to operate. Running these schools is expensive. So this amount gets to around 80,000, 90,000, plus or minus. And there's a question where even when a student comes with a balance of 30,000 shillings, in policy, under the law, they have cleared fees. Whatever else remains is what the school has added on the fees.
Well, let's go back to that, because this is tied directly to this capitation thing that we talk about. Okay? So if we go back 6 years, this is now 2025 that we are in. If we go back 6 years, 2019 is the year where capitation is still owed to schools. It's still owed. There has not been a year since 2019 where capitation has been completed between January and November. And November, where the terms end. There has always been a balance. Now, whether that balance has been carried forward is for you to, do a dance with your guests. It hasn't. And every time we have this conversation, come January or come the next term, it's been told in 2 weeks it will happen. So 2019 until 2025. When did we see the introduction of these extra fees in schools? Well, round about the same time, guys. So what happens? And this is not a make-believe Alice in Wonderland story. This is a real thing. When you join, especially in high school, in public high schools, when you join, there's parents' orientation that takes place about a month after your Form 1s go to school.
Yes.
Okay? And what are you told? Well, you know the situation in the country, parents.
Yeah.
Would you like school to continue for your sons and daughters? Yes, of course you would. Would you want to see that there's a gap? Would you want to see that we're not able to feed your children in the way in which you want us to feed them if they happen to be in boarding school?
We need to give them a conducive environment for them to perform.
And we need this to continue. And we know the problems with capitation being released by the ministry. So what are we going to do? We are going to take the amount that is needed and we're going to load it on school fees. So whereas in a public school, your school fees would be around about 42, 45, 52,000 shillings per year, we're going to load 30,000 shillings, 40,000 shillings on top of that. And now that becomes your school fees for the year. Do you see the problem?
Exactly.
The 52,000 shillings already was burdensome for a majority of the population. We take that money and we load it on that and we say this is what we need to pay in order to ensure seamless processes. Now, playing the devil's advocate, I can understand to an extent why a school would need to do this because they need to keep the process flowing. But it throttles the livelihood of parents who already are struggling to send these children to school. So you must ask yourself, what kind of a system allows for capitation which was prescribed constitutionally,
Budgeted for.
for in the largest budget item after defense in the budget?
600 and something billion.
Billion.
Not million.
Billion. What system allows for that money to not reach schools to the extent where schools will have to now load an extra 30 to 40,000 shillings per year on parents? And then we want to pretend like the ministry has no idea that this happens in schools. You want to tell me that the ministry is not aware that schools are loading some extra between 25 to 40,000 shillings on parents every year?
You know the thinking.
It helps them run. It's scapegoatism.
It is.
And they can run away from that reality because they think, oh, well, at the end of the day, see, wamemaliza shule. See, tumefika November. See, wameenda form 3.
Is it not the same thinking when we talk about school transportation and what it is that then requires declarations?
Yeah.
What is it that is the government's role when it comes to education? The government has allowed for a partnership between private citizens and investors into the school system. So it's like they sit back and let the private sector do their thing for them. So this fundamental right that the students have, without understanding it, that right is actually being abrogated every day by the very people who are supposed to safeguard it. So you now have a situation where the education that was promised to the students cannot be done. It's a vicious cycle. Parents don't have money. Many have lost jobs.
Yes.
Many have to cobble up whatever it is that they can. Now, the burden that was supposed to be lifted off them, anything that is paid for by the government is paid for by the parents and the citizens. Because the government doesn't get money from anywhere else other than from us.
This is what I'm saying. Absolutely. So when you want to come out and say public school heads will have to wait longer for funds after the National Treasury said it will release 48 billion in capitation later this month, schools open Monday without 50% capitation due to them, even as many of them grapple with the lack of classrooms for grade 9 learners. That's a whole other kettle of fish. Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Badi yesterday said the government was mobilizing resources and working closely with the Education Ministry to ensure money hit the school accounts before January 31st. What do you think will happen? And then in the same breath, we will very soon hear from the Ministry of Education that there is an edict, right? The PS Belio Kipsang will stand up one day and say there's an edict, and he's saying that schools will have no right to raise school fees. You have no right to add on these extra levies and fees. The money that you're supposed to give them, where is it? It's in the budget. It's in the budget.
How many times have we heard? We heard the late Professor Magoa saying headmasters aren't allowed to send children away. Yeah. He was ignored resoundingly. He would say so, children would be sent away. If the money that is intended for the upkeep of the students is not paid, How then on earth do they expect the schools to run, first of all? Secondly, schools, even you, surely. You load the burden that is supposed to be on the parents who paid their taxes, which made it possible for a budget to be available for education. You load this very thing onto the parents. And then you punish the parents for not paying for what they have already paid for.
So, and then the poor children show up to
Yes.
school on a lonely Tuesday morning, and then you send them back home.
Yes.
Or you relegate them to a corner in the sun while you deal with those who've actually paid. That's exactly what we're dealing with.
Now, the trauma that I'm saying is this. Do we know what we are creating? Do we know what we've set in motion? There is going to be a generation, because these people are being traumatized. They watch this thing and they're being traumatized. You are going to get Kenyans. All these fellows who are now making decisions will be ancient creatures who will be looking for body parts and who will be trying to see how they can survive.
To be able to walk.
Exactly, and probably try to see how they can chew meat with their gums because they will have lost their teeth. My friend, these people will not care about you also, because at that point in time, it is them who are going to be in charge.
Yeah.
And you are setting the stage for something that will definitely and definitively not favor you, because you will grow old. It doesn't matter what you do, unless you die now. You will grow old. And these children will also grow older. These children will get on with life despite the disadvantages that is being placed on their heads and now willy-nilly by people who are in a position to ensure that their lives are actually better.
And they will remember. I imagine this girl who showed up yesterday in front of her peers being told that, yes, you owe. And the amount was being there shouted for everybody to hear. You will imagine the psychological...
She'll remember this for the rest of her life.
Yes, she will.
Yeah.
The psychological scar that will be in her, and she'll think, you know what? Okay.
And
From
she's
the very beginning, you brandished me to this.
And she's not the only person. There were others who also didn't pay fees.
Yes.
Now, these numbers should also ring alarm bells. When you have parents sending their children to school, it means they do not, as we say in Kenya, they have no otherwise.
Yeah.
If they could, they would have been there themselves. If they're not, that means they couldn't. I don't think, when I say he doesn't know, believe me, it is when you are ignorant that you behave this way. There are many pronouncements that can be made which are responsible, which shows someone is sufficiently sensitive to the situation.
You know, Siti, there's ignorance of knowledge, and then there's also ignorance that is equatable to foolishness. I'm going to go the foolishness way. Because the ignorance that we talk about with foolishness, you cannot possibly tell me that you are unaware that things... You know, there is pontificating, but there is giving the true picture. There is giving the true picture. And this is the true picture. That people cannot afford life anymore. That people are being dealt a hand that they cannot play in this game anymore. And that's the truth. So when you come and tell us that a budget item, you're not able to meet your obligations of a budget item, and that maybe 4 weeks after a school term has begun, maybe that is when you will send 50% of what you're supposed to send, then we have a problem. We have a major problem here. And I keep telling you, look, CT, if I tell you that I love you, you will see something that will show that I love you.
Oh my God, no.
You will know. In the same way, if I feel nothing for you, you will know. You know why? Because I will tell you that it is my job to make sure 1, 2, 3 happens. But if it doesn't happen, I'm telling you how I feel about you.
Yeah.
I am telling you that, yes, okay, we've been here to make sure this education thing works. But, you know, if it works, okay. If people can't afford, no problem. See, we'll get to November. I'm telling you what I really feel. I'm asking you, essentially, to say, listen to what you are being told. If you have an education system that's in a shambles, if you have a healthcare system that's in a shambles, if you have schools like that where you have the speaker is from that county, the speaker of the Senate is from that county, where things like that are happening, they are telling you what they feel. And what we are saying, essentially, is that if you've been told how you feel, it's time for you to act. Don't allow this to continue.
And even when you talk about the situation in our schools today, there's a time during the holidays we hosted an individual in this show who was taking us through the situation at not far from here. Actually, we're in the same constituency, the same ward actually, here in Mukuru. The way that property has been grabbed by individuals who are now running were running a private school there, but they managed to get that. But let's look at the population in that in the ward that we are in. We're talking about a population and a school that has around 2,000, 3,000 kids,
Yes.
and there is no space in that institution.
It's 1 acre.
It is 1 acre.
One.
You know, and here we're talking about being able to provide quality education to these children. What quality education are we offering to these children if the government itself has not sat down to look at, oh, this is the population, we need to add an extra school? Because I can sit here and say, Kimalel Primary School, Eldoret, where I went to, there has been no added school to accommodate the population that continues to grow, because back in the days it was standalone houses. Now we're talking about apartment buildings coming up. That means more population, an extra school for kids to get in there, but nothing has been added. So as we sit here today, we're talking about giving quality education. Where are these kids going to study from?
At the risk of getting in trouble, let me tell you guys a story. So when I say that we can, but we choose not to, and there's a special place in hell for folks who have been given a job to do and they just choose not to do it. That's why you know what you're supposed to do. You actually do have the resources to do it, but you just decide that you're not going to do it.
Yes.
In spite. In spite. You bite off your nose to spite your face. There's a county in this country where the president was visiting not too long ago. Things were not really happening. Boss, mature trees were planted in 1 day. Grass was made to grow and be green and manicured in 1 day. There was no water. A borehole was sunk. There was piped water in 1 day.
Yeah.
Boards were erected very quickly because the president is coming here. Let things be done.
Rice
In 1 day.
Yeah.
In 1 day, I'm telling you, palm trees grew. In 1 day, grass was watered, manicured, and green. In 1 day, borehole was piped, water was flowing. In 1 day,
All this
things moved.
All this in Kenya.
Yes.
Ndu, let me just add
And the
on
man
that.
did not sleep there.
Yeah.
Came, did what he was doing, and went. In 1 day. So nobody can tell me that a sector which has 600 billion, according to it every budget year, gives us a school like that. Brandishes a young 14-year-old girl to go back to wherever she came from because she cannot pay her arrears.
Yeah.
Makes it impossible for every school in the system to be on the same level, so it doesn't matter where you go. Doesn't give you the right, because you're a politician, to send your child to some hoity-toity international school when when the rest of the children in the country have to pander to the whims of a system that already is failing or on its knees. Don't tell me.
Ndu.
Tell somebody else.
60th Madaraka Day celebrations, Bungoma County. A new airport. State House Lodge is launched there. Roads are constructed. Kids, school kids are brought to cheer the president. But after that, they go back to those schools that we are seeing. Nothing being done to make sure that the education is actually as described in the Constitution.
Lest we forget, there was the promise of a two-third gender rule. Was there not?
There was.
What do we have? It was promised that 50% of the women would be in cabinet. We are at only 31.8% as we speak. Lest we forget, health sector reforms. There was a commitment to resolve disputes within health workers within 100 days. This remains unmet. Strikes are still ongoing, despite the things that keep it. There was a promise to support persons with disabilities, promises to allocate market stalls and provide scholarships that have been implemented. Within the same health sector, people with disabilities were supposed to have found a way in which they can be exempt or they can be sustained within the health system without them necessarily undergoing the cost that other people do. This remains unmet. There was the issue of dealing with corruption and governance. There were pledges to uphold the rule of law. The administration had been accused of corruption and undermining independent institutions. As we speak right now, most of the complaints that were there when the Kenya Kwanza government came into power have remained exactly as they were. In some instances,
Worse.
they've actually become
Worse.
worse. There were promises about agriculture and food security. There was the focus on enhancing local food production and establishing agro-processing industries.
Fake fertilizer.
We now have a situation where, in response to this, we got fake fertilizer. Maize has been imported when maize that has been produced locally has not even been consumed. Farmers enduring losses that they didn't need to endure, and the problem persisting. So if we're talking about improvement in that sector, take a look and decide for yourself whether there's improvement or not.
We also have healthcare. We have SHA and SHIF. That is not working. You go to Kenyatta today, Kenyans are dying every day because they cannot access healthcare. SHA SHIF is not working, yet you're being told every day
that it is working. Yes, there was a promise of small and micro and medium enterprises, and there's a commitment to allocate 50 billion annually in support of small businesses. Those of you in this industry, whether that has been met, you would know this better than we do. There was housing, and there's a promise to provide affordable housing to improve living conditions. We know, and we have been told, that houses are being built. We even heard from the president that keys to these houses in this particular year will be given. So this is one of these wait-and-see situations. There was healthcare. The promises to enhance access to quality healthcare for all citizens. The complete opposite, unfortunately, is what we are witnessing right now. The promise to provide remains just that, the promise. Because if we listen to the hue and cry from those who provide healthcare, private, rural, national, government, faith-based, the problems remain the same. The commitment that was made has not been met. And the promises, if any, and if one was to be positive, it's an ongoing promise that doesn't seem likely to be fulfilled in the near and in the distant future. ICT and creativity economy initiatives to promote technology and creativity as economic drivers. Well, again, that was the promise. Do we see the reality of it? If indeed we did, then we would be seeing more and more people being employed. Do we see more and more people being employed? Again, ask that question against the backdrop of the number of industries, businesses that are shutting down, whether this equals more people being employed or more people being out of jobs. The president pledged to create 4 million jobs and reduce the cost of living within 100 days of his office. That one I will not speak about. I will let you breathe it in, and I will let you decide whether that is what has happened. Lest you forget. The promises were made. We didn't ask for these promises to be made. They were made. Political campaigning involves promises. This we know. We talked yesterday about creating a culture where we speak truth and we speak with honesty. If something cannot be done and it was promised, is it impossible to come back and say it was promised but we're unable to do it? Is it impossible?
I think that would be the measure of a man.
Yeah.
The measure of a man, and in this case, man, it will represent human.
Human, yeah.
We are saying that is the measure of a man. That in the event that you were true in your proclamations that this is what I actually wanted to do and this is what I promised to do, if you were true, come back and say, we wanted to do this, but because of factor 1, 2, 3, then we were unable. And I know that, you always, it would appear as though you're looking for something to complain about, but why is it important for us to discuss these things in this manner? Because it is very important for those who are in a position of leadership to know that people are aware, that the conversations need to happen, that it needs to be spoken of, that people are aware that they know that they ought to be taken care of, that their livelihood essentially rests in your hands as leadership, that there are things that actually need to be done, that when you make a promise, you should fulfill it. And if you cannot fulfill it for whatever reason, that you open your mouth and say that we cannot because of 1, 2, 3. What is the reason why now, for example, that 48 billion shillings that should go out in January to the schools hasn't gone out? Do you know, with all of this talking, we don't know the reason.
Yeah.
We've not been told why. Is there no money? Is there not 48 billion shillings in the country purse? What's the reason why that at this time Treasury is scrambling for resources? Or is it because for every 100 shillings that comes into the country, 70 shillings of that goes to paying off debt for which we do not know what it went to do? Maybe that's the reason. But are you being told? No, you're not. And that is why I continue to say, if your leadership does not take the pains to explain to you the reasons why things are happening in the manner in which they are, it will operate with or without you.
Yes.
And we are saying that you cannot be in a situation where leadership operates in spite of you. It cannot be, because it is because of you that they are there. We'll continue to talk about these things because it's necessary for people to know that we are aware. We continue to talk about these things. We continue to raise these issues because if we don't, we're complicit too.
When you talk about enhanced agricultural support and you talk about significant investment in agriculture and the planned boost of food production and to reduce the reliance on imports. And yet, right now, we're talking about from October last year, and we're moving on. 2 million Kenyans are facing starvation. 2 million. 2 million. 2 million. What does that tell you about this program that you're saying you have, where you're supposed to boost production? You're supposed to ensure that we have reduced reliance on importation. Have we really? No. Actually, we keep importing. And the things we import in terms of foodstuffs are things we could actually grow locally.
And City, when we were having that same conversation yesterday with Senator Mtata, we know the solution to this, delinking the treasury from the presidency.
Yes.
National Assembly knows what they need to do.
Yes.
The president knows what needs to be done.
Yes.
He holds the majority in that house.
He does.
He can easily direct his majority leader to come up with a motion to delink Treasury from the presidency and make sure that Treasury runs as an independent institution that has no political control. But they choose not to do that because they want to control this money. Remember that whatever it is you're talking about, talk about education, health, and whatnot, it is money that we as Kenyans have already paid for. It therefore behoves upon the leadership and those in power to make sure that the services that we deserve, we're not begging for it. It is our right. Under the Constitution, it is my right to health, right to education. We are not begging for it. They need to understand that they must provide these services because we are telling them that we want them.
We've already paid for it. That's really the point we're making. We've actually paid for this. So can we please have it? Okay.
You're not even pleased, Seth. You're being polite and saying, can we please have it? Just do your job. Just do your job. See, look, it's a principal thing. It is a principal issue. You wake up in the morning every day at 3 a.m. You show up here at 4. 2, then you eat too early. You show up here at 4 o'clock. He does. You show up here at 4 o'clock. Does somebody remind you every day, oh, by the way, CT, you need to be here at 4 o'clock so that you can get your thing done and we can have this conversation? Does somebody, every day somebody needs to remind you?
Nope.
So, because where do you think you're going? The beach? When you show up at Treasury, when you show up at the Ministry of Education, when you show up at the Ministry of Health, when you show up at the county level, does somebody need to remind you, oh, by the way, this is why you are here today?
And when you arrive there, you actually have a job description.
Yeah.
And the job description exists because it's a job you need to do.
Come on, man.
That's why you have that description.
Yeah.
That's why we need to remind you over and over and over again. Even one of the good books says, you know what? You need to live it out daily. It's not you can do today and then not tomorrow. Daily. You need to do it daily. You show up daily to do the thing. There are millions of children depending on you. There are millions of sick depending on you. There are roads that have not been... See it.
Even as we conclude, there's something that I looked forward to when I listened to the pronouncements that were being made during campaign time. That was on poverty reduction. The idea was to lift 5.5 million people out of poverty and reduce hunger for 2.9 million individuals by improving access to resources and employment opportunities.
90% of Kenyans today are poorer when that statement was being made.
Yes. So when we look, focus on the things that you need to understand, and citizens, it is your duty, yes, to ensure that you hold your leaders to account. Yes, do not blame them, hold them to account.
And it's almost a demand that we do.
Yes.
It's almost a demand that we have to hold to account as we hold ourselves to account on things that we need to do, because I do feel that there's a big part that we need to play, but we also have it's a demand upon us to hold people accountable for the things that they are supposed to do. So have the conversation. People ask, why are you so upset? And I ask, why are you not? Why are you not upset? You should be.
You all have MCAs, you all have MPs. Hold these fellows to account.
You should. Conversations continue. Good morning. It's 8 a.m.